Welcome to this deep dive into the world of airports.
The amazing world of airports.
Yeah. You've given us a bunch of sources about how airports work.
You're hoping to get a grasp
And we're going to try to make sense of it all.
on everything from airport categories and types
All the ways
to the markings and signs that guide pilots on the ground.
Yeah, all that stuff that you see when you're taxiing around.
That's right.
Like, what does it all mean? I think we can help you out with that.
Absolutely. And, this deep dive is going to equip you
Hopefully.
to navigate airports more confidently,
Yeah.
whether you're a seasoned traveler or just curious about what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, if you've ever looked out the window
Right.
of the plane when you're taxiing
Absolutely.
and been like, what is going on down there?
Yeah.
This is for you.
This is for you.
Did you know there's a specific color language
For airport lights.
for airport lights?
Yeah.
Crazy, right? Or that runways are actually numbered based on magnetic north?
That's right.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And understanding these aspects of airport operations is really key for both safety and efficiency in aviation.
Okay, so first up, how does the FAA categorize airports? They don't just lump them all together,
I
right?
don't know.
There must be some way of differentiating them.
Right. The FAA categorizes airports based on the type and volume of activity that they handle.
Makes sense.
So the first category is commercial service airports,
The one we're all familiar with.
the ones most of us are familiar with.
Yeah.
These airports have scheduled passenger service
Okay.
and handle at least 2,500 passenger boardings annually.
Okay, so like big hubs like LAX or JFK.
Think of those major hubs.
Yeah.
Like LAX, JFK, O'Hare.
The ones we love to hate.
Right.
Okay, so what about airports that focus on cargo?
So that's the second category.
Okay.
Cargo service airports.
Makes sense.
These airports are specifically designed to handle air freight,
Okay.
and they see a lot of cargo traffic,
Okay.
over 100 million pounds of landed cargo weight each year. But what's interesting is that an airport can actually be both commercial service and cargo service.
Oh, so it could be a multitasking airport.
That's right.
So if those are like the big players, what about smaller airports?
Yeah.
Are there categories for them too?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
There are reliever airports,
Okay.
which are designed to alleviate congestion at busier commercial airports.
Oh, okay.
They can be publicly or privately owned,
Okay.
but they're essential for improving general aviation access.
Okay.
And then you have general aviation airports,
Yeah.
which make up the largest group in the U.S. system.
Wow. Okay.
And these airports cater to a variety of operations,
Okay.
like private flights, flight training.
Okay.
Think of those smaller airports you might see,
Yeah.
maybe even grass strips sometimes,
Yeah.
that aren't as bustling as the major hubs.
So the four main categories: commercial service, cargo service, reliever, and general aviation.
That's right.
Yeah, it makes me think about all the different types of airports I've been to over the years.
Sure. Some are these like sprawling metropolises, and others are small and charming.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about this is that these airport categories can significantly impact the local communities they serve.
Oh, okay.
So,
Interesting.
for example, general aviation airports often play a crucial role in supporting local businesses,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
providing essential services like aerial surveying,
Uh-huh.
flight instruction, and even medical transport.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
It's like they're woven into the fabric of the community.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about categories.
Right.
What about types of airports? I know there are towered and non-towered,
That's right.
but I've always been a little fuzzy on what exactly that means.
Sure. So you're right. Those are the two main types,
Yeah.
towered and untowered.
Yeah.
The key difference lies in the presence of an operating control tower.
Okay.
So towered airports have air traffic controllers
Okay.
who manage the flow of traffic,
Okay.
giving pilots instructions for everything from taxiing to takeoff and landing. So it's like having a traffic cop in the sky, keeping everything organized,
Exactly.
preventing any mid-air fender benders.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
At non-towered airports, things are a bit more independent.
Okay.
There's no mandatory two-way radio communication with air traffic control.
Wait, really?
That's right.
No air traffic control.
Oh,
That sounds a little nerve-wracking.
it might seem that way,
Uh-huh.
but pilots operating at non-towered airports use a specific radio frequency
Okay.
called the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, or CTF,
Okay.
to announce their positions and intentions.
So they're like,
They
for the
essentially
galaxy.
self-announce their plans
To everyone.
to ensure that everyone's on the same page
Got it.
and to maintain that situational awareness.
So it's like a pilot's party line.
Right.
Where everyone is like
Yeah.
chiming in with their location and plans. Like
Yeah.
entering downwind for runway 36.
Right.
Or taxiing to the fuel pumps.
Exactly.
Just to keep things coordinated.
Precisely. And that highlights the importance of clear communication and shared responsibility for safety in those environments.
Yeah.
It's a stark contrast to the constant guidance provided by ATC at towered airports.
Yeah, it really makes you appreciate
Right.
that level of coordination required
Yeah.
at non-towered airports.
Absolutely.
So before a pilot even thinks about taking off,
Right.
they need a ton of information about the destination airport, right?
Absolutely. Pilots rely on several sources to gather information about the airport
Yeah.
before they even step foot on the plane.
Like, what's their pre-flight homework like?
Right. Well, first,
Okay.
they consult aeronautical charts.
Okay.
These charts provide a visual representation of the airport layout,
Okay.
including runways, taxiways, obstructions, and even the surrounding terrain.
So like a roadmap of the sky?
Exactly. It's like a roadmap for the sky.
Okay, what else?
Then there's the Chart Supplement US,
Oh, yeah.
which is a comprehensive guide packed with detailed information about each airport. It includes communication frequencies, services available, details about potential hazards, and even the lengths of runways.
It's like an encyclopedia for airports.
It is. It has so much information.
Okay.
And crucially, pilots can't forget about NOTAMs
Bit of tips, yeah.
or notices to airmen.
Right.
These are time-critical updates about changes to airport conditions
Okay.
that couldn't be included in the charts or the chart supplement.
Okay.
They can include information about runway closures, construction, changes in lighting, or any other important updates.
So I imagine ignoring NOTAMs would be a bit like driving with your eyes closed.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
NOTAMs are essential for flight safety, as they provide pilots with the most up-to-date information that could affect their flight.
Okay, so we have charts, we have the chart supplement, we have NOTAMs.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes. One more critical source of information.
Okay.
ATIS.
ATIS, okay.
Which stands for Automated Terminal Information Service.
Okay.
It's a continuous broadcast of local weather and airport conditions
Okay.
that pilots can listen to before they even contact air traffic control.
Got it.
It'll include things like which runways are in use, any special procedures in effect,
Okay.
visibility reports.
So it's like the airport's own radio station keeping everyone in the loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just like a radio station, each ATIS update is given an alphabetic code,
Oh, okay.
like Information Bravo or Information Charlie. So pilots know they have the most current information.
Okay, so like you tune in and it's like,
Right.
Information Bravo.
Exactly.
You know, you have the latest.
The latest information.
Got it. So once a pilot has digested all that information from charts, chart supplement,
Right.
NOTAMs, and ANISIS,
Uh-huh.
they're ready to taxi.
Yeah.
But how do they actually navigate around the airport? It seems like such a maze down there.
You're right.
Like, how do they know where to go?
The ground environment can be a bit of a jungle, but there's a system in place to help pilots find their way.
Okay.
And it involves a whole language of markings and signs.
Okay, so let's talk about the markings first.
Sure.
I've always been curious about runway numbers. They seem so random.
They're not random at all.
Okay.
Runway numbers are based on magnetic north,
Okay.
and they correspond to the runway's magnetic heading,
Okay.
rounded to the nearest 10 degrees.
Got it.
So, for example, runway 9 points, roughly 90 degrees east.
Okay.
Runway 18 points south,
Okay.
and so on.
So that's why they're always in those
Exactly.
increments of 10.
Uh-huh.
Pretty clever.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder, though, how pilots differentiate between parallel runways.
That's where the letters come.
Oh, the letters. Okay.
L for left, C for center, and R for right.
Okay.
So you might have runway 36L,
Okay.
36C, and 36R, all running parallel to each other.
So those letters are really important for
Very important.
distinguishing those parallel runways.
That's right.
Okay, what about situations where a runway is partially closed?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
for construction or maintenance?
That's where relocated thresholds come in.
Relocated threshold.
The threshold is essentially the beginning of the runway that's available for landing.
Okay.
So if a portion of the runway is closed,
Uh-huh.
the threshold is shifted.
Okay.
And markings clearly indicate the new starting point for takeoffs and landings.
So it's like they're shortening the runway
Exactly.
temporarily.
That's right.
Is that different from a displaced threshold?
Good question.
Which I think I've seen on airport diagrams.
A displaced threshold is a little different.
Okay.
Because it's a permanent shift from the very beginning of the runway.
Okay.
Often due to obstacles.
Okay.
Like trees or buildings
Uh-huh.
in the approach path.
Okay.
This means pilots have less runway available for landings.
Okay.
But the portion behind the displaced threshold can still be used for takeoffs.
Oh, interesting.
Right.
So it's like the runway has a shorter landing zone.
That's right.
But the takeoff zone remains the same.
Exactly.
It makes you realize how much pilots need to pay attention to all those markings.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to something as critical as runway length.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to add another layer of safety,
Okay.
there's the Runway Safety Area, or RSA.
Oh, okay. The RSA, is that the area around the runway?
That's right.
That's clear of obstacles.
It's more than just extra space.
Okay.
The RSA is a specifically graded area that surrounds the runway.
Okay.
And it's designed to reduce the risk of damage to an aircraft if it veers off during takeoff or landing.
So it's like a safety net.
It is.
In case things go wrong.
That's right.
Are there any specific signs
Yes.
associated with the RSA?
There are a few.
Okay.
Runway holding position signs
Yeah.
are used to indicate where aircraft must stop
before
entering the runway.
I've heard those are incredibly important.
They are.
That pilots who, accidentally cross those lines can face serious consequences.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Failing to comply with runway holding position signs can lead to runway incursions, which are a major safety concern.
Right.
And could even result in action from the FAA.
Yikes. So those signs are not to be taken lightly.
Not at all.
What other signs are there?
There are also safety area boundary signs, usually found on taxiways, that intersect with the runway to indicate that the pilot is clear of the RSA.
Got it.
And when you're talking about taxiways, there's the whole system of color-coded markings.
Oh, right, like those yellow lines?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yellow markings are for direction.
Go.
Think of it like the yellow lines on a road.
Got it.
And then there are black markings on a yellow background.
Yeah.
These are for destination signs.
Okay.
So those black on yellow signs you see that say gates or FBO are helping pilots find their way around.
Makes sense. Okay.
And don't forget the enhanced taxiway centerline markings.
Enhanced taxiway centerline markings?
Yeah.
What are those?
They are dashed lines along the taxiway centerline that serve as a warning to pilots that they're approaching a runway.
Okay.
It's a really important safety feature, especially in low visibility conditions.
It's like a heads up saying hey, runway ahead.
Exactly.
Pay attention.
That's right.
Okay, so we've covered runway markings, taxiway markings, anything else?
Yes. There are also markings associated with LASO.
LASO, okay.
Land and hold short operations.
Right.
This is when ATC allows simultaneous operations on intersecting runways.
Okay.
The landing aircraft must stop short of the intersecting runway.
Wow, that's super complex.
It can be.
Yeah.
Pilots have to understand the procedures and markings.
Right.
And they have the final say in accepting or declining a LASO clearance.
Okay, so that's a lot of responsibility on the pilot.
That's right.
So all these markings are essentially the language of the airport.
They are.
Yeah, it makes you realize how much pilots rely on visual cues to get around safely.
Absolutely.
Speaking of visual cues, what about airport lighting? I've always been curious about all those flashing lights you see at night.
Airport lighting is absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Especially for night operations or when visibility is low.
Okay, so let's start with those flashing lights.
Sure.
Are those the airport beacons?
That's right.
Okay.
Those flashing lights are beacons. And they serve to help pilots identify the airport from a distance.
Oh.
They usually operate from dusk till dawn.
Okay.
But can also be activated during the day.
Okay.
If visibility is poor.
Got it.
What's even cooler is that the color codes of the beacons reveal what kind of airport it is.
So it's like the airport is signaling its identity.
Exactly.
Okay.
For example, civilian land airports use white and green, while water airports use white and yellow.
Wow, it's like a secret code.
It is.
Yeah.
And it helps pilots know what to expect as they approach the airport.
Okay.
And then, of course, there are the approach lighting systems.
Right.
Which help guide pilots to the runway, especially during instrument approaches.
Are those the lights that, seem to line up with the runway?
That's right.
Creating a path?
Yeah.
For the aircraft to follow?
Exactly. They provide visual cues, even in low visibility, and can really help a pilot stay on track.
So it's like a guiding light leading them safely to the runway.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay. Are there different types of approach light systems?
Yes, there are several types,
Okay.
each with its own configuration and purpose.
Okay.
Some provide more visual guidance than others.
Okay.
For example, the ALSF2,
ALSF2, yeah.
which stands for Approach Lighting System with Sequenced Flashing Lights,
Okay.
uses a series of flashing lights to create a distinctive visual pattern.
Makes sense. So it's not just like a random arrangement of lights.
That's right.
It's a carefully designed system?
It is.
What about those lights that help pilots
Right.
judge their descent angle?
You're talking about visual glide slope indicators.
Yeah.
They help pilots maintain the correct descent angle to the runway, making sure they're not coming in too high or too low.
That seems like a pretty crucial piece of equipment.
Very crucial.
Are there different types of those too?
There are
Okay.
FAA,
Okay.
PHAK,
Okay.
and tricolor systems,
Okay.
or all types of visual glide slope indicators,
Okay.
each with its own unique set of lights and signals.
Okay.
And while they're incredibly helpful, it's important to remember that even experienced pilots
Yeah.
still rely heavily on these systems, especially when landing in challenging conditions.
Yeah. It's a good reminder that even with all the technology we have, visual cues are still absolutely essential in aviation.
That's right.
Okay, so we've covered beacons, approach lighting, glide slope indicators. What about lighting on the runway itself?
Well, you have runway edge lights, which are the white lights that outline the edges of the runway. But on instrument runways, the last 2,000 feet, or half the runway length, whichever is less, are marked with amber lights.
Oh, why? The changing color.
The amber lights signal to the pilot that they're approaching the end of the runway.
Oh, okay.
And the lights that mark the very end of the runway are red,
Okay.
letting pilots know they've run out of pavement.
Yeah, a clear warning system.
Exactly.
I've also noticed like lights that are embedded in the runway itself. What are those for?
Those are in-runway lighting systems.
Okay.
They include centerline lights to help pilots stay aligned with the runway, touchdown zone lights to show the ideal landing area, and even special lights for LASOS operations.
It's really amazing how much thought and planning goes into airport lighting. It's not just about illuminating the runway.
Right.
It's about creating a visual language that helps pilots navigate safely and efficiently.
It really is.
And just like airport beacons, the intensity and configuration of runway lights can be controlled by ATC.
That's right.
FSS, or even the pilots themselves at some non-towered airports.
That's right.
Depending on the situation and visibility conditions.
That's right.
So pilots can request specific lighting configurations if needed.
That's right. It's all about maintaining situational awareness and ensuring safe operations no matter what the circumstances.
Wow, we've already covered so much.
We have.
It's incredible to see how much goes into making airports function.
It really is a fascinating system.
From the categories and types to the markings and lighting systems.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic, sometimes things don't go as planned.
You're right, and that's why we have so many procedures and safety measures in place.
Okay, so let's talk about those moments when things get a little dicey. Those pilot deviations and runway incursions that make everyone's heart skip a beat.
Absolutely. Yeah, those moments when things get a little hairy out there on the runway.
Okay, so let's start with pilot deviations.
Okay.
What exactly constitutes a pilot deviation, or PD?
A pilot deviation is any action taken by a pilot that violates federal aviation regulations.
Okay.
Or FARs, for short.
Of course, got it.
Basically breaking the rules of the sky, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
So it's not always like a...
Not at all.
Deliberate act of rebellion.
No, sometimes it's a simple mistake, a misinterpretation of instructions, or even a lapse in judgment.
Okay.
But regardless of the reason, any deviation has the potential to compromise safety.
Okay, so what are the different types of pilot deviations?
So there are three main types.
Okay.
Airborne deviations, ground deviations, and vehicle pedestrian deviations.
Okay, so airborne deviations first.
Right. Airborne deviations involve actions that occur while the aircraft is in flight. This could include things like straying from an assigned altitude or heading, or even entering restricted airspace without clearance.
Yikes. Right.
Especially entering restricted airspace.
Big no-no.
Yeah. What about those ground deviations?
So ground deviations, also known as surface deviations,
Okay.
happen on the airport surface.
Okay.
Like taxiing without clearance from air traffic control,
Uh-huh.
taking off or landing without permission,
Okay.
or failing to hold short of a designated hold line.
So basically not following the instructions
Exactly.
from air traffic control.
It's breaking the rules of the road, but on the runway.
Got it. And what about those vehicle pedestrian deviations you mentioned?
Right.
Those sound a bit different.
They are vehicle pedestrian deviations involve anyone or anything
Okay.
entering the runway environment without proper authorization.
Okay.
It could be a vehicle driver taking a wrong turn,
Uh-huh.
a worker crossing the runway without permission,
Okay.
or even something as simple as a piece of equipment left on the runway.
Well, any unauthorized presence on the runway creates a potential hazard
Yeah.
and is considered a deviation.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
It makes you appreciate the level of coordination and vigilance required to keep those runways safe and free of intrusions.
That's right.
But let's shift gears for a moment
Okay.
and talk about those heart-stopping moments we call runway incursions.
Those close calls.
Yeah, can you remind me what exactly defines a runway incursion?
So a runway incursion is any occurrence on the airport runway environment
Okay.
that creates a collision hazard.
Okay.
It could involve an aircraft,
Uh-huh.
a vehicle,
Uh-huh.
a person,
Okay.
or even an object on the runway that shouldn't be there.
Okay.
Basically anything that creates a oh no moment on the runway.
Like when you see those news reports of like a near miss between two planes.
Exactly.
Oh, those always make me cringe.
Those near misses
Yeah.
are often the result of a runway incursion.
Okay.
And they happen more often than people realize.
Ah.
Yeah. And while pilot error is a common factor,
Okay.
runway incursions can also be caused by air traffic control mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
vehicle drivers not adhering to procedures,
Okay.
or even something as unexpected as wildlife on the runway.
So it really does take a village to keep those runways safe.
It does.
And you mentioned that pilot deviations
Right.
are one of the most common causes of these incursions, right?
Right. When pilots fail to comply with instructions,
Mm-hmm.
misunderstand clearances, or miss critical information,
Okay.
it can create a dangerous situation.
So clear communication and understanding those ATC instructions is paramount.
That's right.
Okay. What are some other common factors that contribute to pilot deviations?
So lack of airport familiarity is a big one,
Okay.
especially at those massive, complex airports
Uh-huh.
with a spider web of taxiways and runways.
Yeah, you can get lost down there.
It's easy to get disoriented or miss a critical sign,
Yeah.
especially if you're not familiar with the layout. And then there's complacency.
Complacency, okay.
When pilots get too comfortable with their routines
Uh-huh.
and start skipping steps,
Yeah.
they increase their risk of making a mistake.
So even experienced pilots
Absolutely.
can fall victim to complacency.
It's human nature
Yeah.
to become more relaxed and less vigilant when you've done something many times before.
Right.
But in aviation, that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
Every flight, every takeoff and landing requires the same level of focus and attention to detail.
So no room for autopilot when it comes to flying.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, okay. So knowing that pilot deviations are a major contributor to those scary runway incursions,
Right.
what can pilots do to avoid making these mistakes
Right.
and stay safe on the ground?
Well, preparation is key.
Okay.
Before even stepping into the cockpit,
Mm-hmm.
pilots should thoroughly review the airport diagrams,
Okay.
especially for unfamiliar airports,
Right.
to get a clear mental picture of the layout.
So it's like studying the map
Exactly.
before you set off on a road trip.
Precisely. It helps you visualize your route,
Mm-hmm.
identify potential hazards,
Okay.
and be prepared for any surprises.
Got it.
And speaking of surprises,
Yeah.
checking those NOTAMs before each flight is absolutely crucial.
Right.
It's amazing how often pilots discover last-minute changes
Yeah.
to runway closures or construction that could completely alter their plans.
Yeah. It's like checking for road closures.
That's right.
Before you drive somewhere new.
Absolutely.
You don't want to end up at a dead end.
You don't.
Okay. And once they're on the ground,
Right.
pilots need to be extra vigilant
Absolutely.
about following ATC instructions.
That's right.
Reading back all hold short instructions, confirming runway assignments,
Yeah.
requesting clarification if anything is unclear can really help prevent misunderstandings.
It's like double-checking your work
Yeah.
before you hit the submit button.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember you mentioned that ATC sometimes uses a runway as a taxiway. That seems like a recipe for confusion.
It can be, especially if a pilot isn't expecting it.
Right.
But it's more common than you might think,
Oh, really?
especially at airports with limited space
Uh-huh.
or when a taxiway is under construction.
So how do pilots avoid accidentally taking off
Right.
on a runway that's actually being used as a taxiway?
That's where clear communication with ATC is vital.
Okay.
Pilots need to be absolutely certain they're on the correct route
Okay.
and have received explicit clearance to enter the runway for takeoff.
Right.
And if they're unsure,
Yeah.
they should never hesitate to ask ATC for confirmation.
It's always better to ask us a silly question
Absolutely.
than to make a potentially dangerous mistake.
Exactly.
Okay. And speaking of mistakes,
Right.
we've talked about pilot deviations leading to runway incursions.
Uh-huh.
But what about runway confusion?
Runway confusion is a major factor in many incidents and accidents,
Okay.
and it's something that every pilot needs to be aware of. It happens when a pilot mistakenly takes off or lands on the wrong runway, or even a taxiway.
That sounds terrifying.
It can be,
Yeah.
especially if you're the pilot who realizes you're in the wrong spot.
Yeah, I can only imagine like the adrenaline rush.
I know.
No. What are the typical causes of runway confusion?
Often it comes down to the complexity of the airport layout,
Okay.
especially those with multiple closely spaced runways,
Uh-huh.
low visibility conditions, or even the joint use of a runway as a taxiway.
Right.
It's easy to get disoriented and mistake one runway for another
Yeah.
if you're not paying close attention.
It's like being in a foreign city and taking the wrong
Exactly.
exit off the highway.
That's a great analogy.
Okay, so what's the best way to combat runway confusion?
The key is to be proactive and use all available resources.
Okay.
Pilots should carefully review airport diagrams
Uh-huh.
before landing or taking off.
Okay.
Double-check their runway assignments with ATC
Mm-hmm.
and use their navigational aids to
Right.
confirm their position.
So being extra cautious and double-checking everything
Right.
is the name of the game.
That's right.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of ATC instructions.
Okay.
What are some key phrases that pilots
Yeah.
and even attentive passengers
Yeah.
should listen for when they're on the ground?
We've already discussed hold short,
Right, hold short.
which is that critical instruction that keeps planes from entering a runway without clearance.
Right.
Pilots must read back the entire clearance,
Okay.
including the specific hold short point,
Mm-hmm.
to ensure they understand exactly where they're supposed to stop.
No room for error there.
Nope.
Okay, so it's not just about hearing the words hold short.
Right.
It's about understanding
Exactly.
the precise location where you need to stop.
That's right. And when it comes to crossing runways,
Okay.
things have become even more specific.
Okay.
As of June 2010,
Uh-huh.
ATC is required to issue explicit instructions to either cross or hold short
Okay.
of each
Okay.
runway.
So they can't just say, like, cleared to cross.
No, they have to be very specific.
Okay.
So by explicitly stating cross runway 36
Uh-huh.
or hold short of runway 27,
Okay.
there's no room for ambiguity.
Right. It's very clear.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it helps prevent those situations where a pilot might think they have clearance to cross all runways
Right.
when they only have clearance for one.
Okay, so it seems like a subtle change,
It is.
but it probably makes a big difference in terms of clarity.
Absolutely does.
Okay, I'm starting to understand the
Yeah.
importance of precision in those ATC instructions.
It's very precise.
What about when you see a plane sitting at the beginning of the runway,
Okay.
seemingly ready to go, but not moving?
Right.
It's like they're in a holding pattern, but on the ground.
That's the line up and wait instruction.
Often abbreviated.
Abbreviated as LUA.
LUAWO. Okay.
It's used when ATC can't immediately give a takeoff clearance, perhaps due to traffic on final approach or wake turbulence from a preceding departure.
So the pilot is allowed to taxi
That's right.
onto the runway,
Uh-huh.
get into position,
Yep.
but must hold there
That's right.
until they receive the official cleared for takeoff.
Exactly.
Okay, it's like saying, get ready, get set.
Right.
But hold on a sec.
Exactly.
Why not just have them hold short
Good question.
until the runway is clear?
It's often a matter of efficiency.
Yeah.
By having the aircraft lined up and ready to go,
Mm-hmm.
ATC can streamline the flow of traffic,
Okay,
especially at busy airports.
got it.
But there are safety concerns associated with LUAW as well.
Okay, so how do they mitigate those safety risks?
So ATC will advise the pilot of the reason for the delay,
Okay.
like approaching traffic or wake turbulence.
Uh-huh.
And they're supposed to issue the takeoff clearance as soon as it's safe.
Okay.
There's also a time limit. If the takeoff clearance isn't received within 90 seconds of receiving the line up and wait instruction,
Uh-huh.
the pilot should contact ATC.
Okay.
to confirm they're still supposed to be holding.
So it's a balancing act between efficiency and safety,
It is.
with clear communication as the key ingredient.
Absolutely.
Okay, what about those times when a runway is temporarily shortened
Okay.
because of construction or other reasons?
So when a runway is temporarily or permanently shortened,
Uh-huh.
the ATA's broadcast will clearly announce this,
Okay.
using the words warning and shortened
Uh-huh.
to emphasize the change.
Okay.
And ATC will include the phrase runway shortened in their instructions.
So it's hard for a pilot to miss
Yeah,
that crucial piece of information.
it's hammered home pretty clearly.
Right.
For example, the pilot might hear runway 36 shortened, cleared for takeoff,
Uh-huh.
or runway 36 shortened, cleared to land.
Okay.
And if the takeoff is an intersection departure,
Intersection departure. Okay.
meaning they're not using the full length of the runway,
Right.
ATC will specify the available runway length in the clearance.
So there's no ambiguity about
Yeah.
how much runway they have to work with?
Not at all.
Okay, so far we've been talking a lot about radio communication
Right.
between pilots and ATC.
Uh,
But what happens if the radio malfunctions?
okay.
It seems like that would be a major problem.
Radio malfunctions are a real concern.
Yeah.
And there are specific procedures in place
Okay.
for pilots to follow if they lose communication.
Okay.
The actions they take depend on whether the transmitter,
Okay.
receiver,
Uh-huh.
or both have malfunctioned.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Okay.
What if just the receiver goes out, meaning the pilot can transmit
Right.
but not receive?
In those cases, pilots are trained to transmit blind,
Transmit blind. Yeah.
essentially broadcasting their intentions
Uh-huh.
and hoping that ATC is monitoring the frequency.
So they're talking into the void and crossing their fingers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not the most ideal situation,
Right.
especially in busy airspace,
Yeah.
but it's better than staying silent.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What if the transmitter is the problem?
Okay.
Meaning they can hear ATC,
Right.
but can't respond.
Then they can acknowledge ATC instructions using visual signaling.
Visual signals. Okay.
During the day, pilots can rock their wings.
Oh, okay.
And at night, they can blink their landing lights.
It's like semaphore signaling
Exactly.
with an airplane.
That's right.
Pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
But what happens if both the transmitter and receiver are kaput?
Right.
No communication at all.
That seems like a real nightmare scenario.
Yeah, it does.
It's definitely not ideal.
Okay.
Pilots who experience a complete radio failure
Uh-huh.
essentially become Nordo,
Nordo. Okay.
no radio.
Got it.
They have to rely on their knowledge of procedures,
Okay.
visual cues from the airport environment,
Uh-huh.
and their own judgment to navigate safely. If they need to land at a towered airport,
Yeah.
they'll try to get the tower's attention visually,
Okay.
hoping the controller can guide them in using light gun signals.
Ah, yes, the light gun.
Elaborate.
Talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
How controllers can use it to communicate.
that's right.
Basic instructions like cleared to land
Yeah.
or hold short.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a great backup communication system,
Yeah.
especially in those rare situations where radio communication fails.
Okay, so we've covered the types of radio failures
Right.
and the procedures for dealing with them.
Uh-huh.
But what about the radios themselves?
Okay.
What are the most common types used in general aviation?
So the VHF radio,
Okay.
which stands for very high frequency,
Okay.
is the standard for communication in general aviation.
VHF, like FM radio.
Similar concept, but different frequencies.
Okay.
VHF radios operate on frequencies between 118.0 megahertz and 136.975 megahertz.
Okay. And what makes VHF radios so suitable for aviation?
Well, they're relatively simple to operate, quite reliable,
Mm-hmm.
and they utilize line-of-sight transmission,
Line of sight transmission. Okay.
which means the signal travels in a straight line.
Okay.
So the higher you fly, the further you can communicate.
That makes sense.
Exactly. That makes VHF radios ideal for communication with ATC,
Uh-huh.
both on the ground and in the air.
Okay. So are all VHF radios the same?
Not quite. There are two main classifications of VHF radios,
Okay.
720 and 760.
720 and 760. Okay.
Okay, the main difference between them
Okay.
is the number of channels they can access.
Okay.
720 radios have a frequency range up to 135.975 megahertz,
Okay.
while 760 radios extend to 136.975 megahertz.
So it's like having a radio
Right.
with more stations to choose from.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. Okay.
And having more channels is becoming increasingly important as airspace gets more crowded.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And both 720 and 760 radios utilize 25 kilohertz spacing between channels, right?
That's the standard in the U.S.
Okay.
But in some parts of the world, like Europe, they're implementing a newer channel plan that uses 8.33 kilohertz spacing.
Oh, wow. Why the change?
It's mainly to address the growing shortage of VHF frequencies,
Okay.
especially in those areas with high air traffic density.
Uh-huh.
The narrower channel spacing allows them to squeeze more channels into the available spectrum.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's like creating more lanes on a busy highway to accommodate more cars.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah.
So pilots flying in those regions need radios
Absolutely.
that are compatible with the 8.33 kilohertz spacing.
That's right. It's something for pilots to be mindful of,
Yeah.
especially when planning international flights.
Okay, so we've talked about radio failures,
Right.
the different types of radios used in general aviation.
Uh-huh.
But what about the actual operation of these radios?
Okay.
Are there specific procedures or etiquette
Absolutely.
pilots need to follow?
Just like we have rules and etiquette for driving on roads,
Okay.
there are specific procedures for communicating on aviation frequencies. Using proper radio phraseology and procedures
Okay.
is critical for maintaining order, ensuring clarity,
Okay.
and preventing misunderstandings,
Right.
all of which are absolutely essential for safety.
So no casual conversations or slang on the radio.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Pilots need to be concise
Oh.
and use standard terminology
Got it.
to avoid any ambiguity.
Okay.
There's also a specific phonetic alphabet
Yeah.
used to spell out words or aircraft identifiers.
Alpha Bravo Charlie. I remember learning that
Exactly.
in flight school.
Uh-huh.
All right.
And it's not just about clarity.
Okay.
It's also about ensuring that critical information
Right.
is transmitted accurately and efficiently,
Uh-huh.
especially when dealing with things like altitude clearances,
Okay.
position reports,
Uh-huh.
and traffic avoidance instructions.
Right. In those situations, every word counts.
Precisely.
Yep.
And it's not just about what you say, but also how you say it.
Okay.
Pilots are expected to maintain a calm and professional demeanor
Okay.
on the radio, even in stressful situations.
So no yelling Mayday unless it's a genuine emergency.
Exactly. Maintaining a calm and controlled tone
Right.
helps prevent panic
Okay.
and allows for clearer communication.
Got it.
And there are specific procedures for handling a variety of situations,
Okay.
from routine communications to emergencies.
It sounds like there's a protocol
There is.
for everything.
Absolutely.
It makes you realize that radio communication is more than just talking.
It is.
It's an essential part of
Right.
the safety culture in aviation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move from the cockpit to the control tower.
Okay.
We've talked about pilots communicating with ATC.
Right.
But what exactly is air traffic control?
Okay.
And what do those folks in the tower actually do?
So air traffic control, or ATC,
ATC, okay.
is the system that manages the flow of aircraft
Okay.
in the airspace and on the ground at airports. It's essentially the invisible hand that keeps everything running smoothly and safely.
So they're like the air traffic cops,
Exactly.
keeping those skies organized.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
They're the guardians of the airspace system,
Okay.
responsible for separating aircraft,
Huh.
issuing clearances,
Okay.
and providing guidance to pilots.
And they operate at different levels, right?
Yes, they do.
Like tower control, approach control,
Are-
and route control.
Exactly. Each level of ATC has a specific area of responsibility
Okay.
and manages a different segment of airspace.
Got it.
So tower controllers handle traffic in the immediate vicinity of the airport,
Okay.
guiding aircraft on the ground and in the air.
Uh-huh.
During takeoffs and landings,
Right.
approach controllers manage aircraft as they arrive and depart
Yeah.
within a certain radius of the airport,
Okay.
essentially guiding them through the transition from on-ride airspace
Okay.
to the airport environment.
So it's like a relay race with each controller passing the baton to the next.
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
And then you have the en route controllers,
Right.
who are responsible for managing the flow of traffic between airports.
Okay, so they're the ones who keep those planes
Exactly.
from running into each other while they're cruising at 30,000 feet.
That's right.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility.
It is.
It sounds like a pretty demanding job.
It is a very demanding job.
What tools do they use to manage all that traffic?
ATC controllers have a suite of tools at their disposal,
Okay.
including sophisticated radar systems,
Uh-huh.
advanced communication equipment,
Okay.
and even good old-fashioned maps and charts.
Yeah.
And it takes a special kind of person to be an air traffic controller.
I bet.
They need to be able to think quickly,
Yeah.
make decisions under pressure,
Uh-huh.
and maintain situational awareness at all times.
It's like they have to be master multitaskers.
They do.
Constantly juggling multiple inputs.
Right.
And making critical decisions that affect the safety of hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Absolutely.
It makes me appreciate those folks in the tower even more.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the specific services ATC provides to pilots?
Okay.
We talked about those instructions like hold short
Right.
and line up and wait.
Mm-hmm.
But what else do they do?
One of the most basic services is providing traffic advisories.
Okay, traffic advisory?
Like a heads up
Over heads up.
about other planes in the area.
Okay.
Using radar ATC controllers can monitor aircraft positions
Uh-huh.
and will alert pilots to potential conflicts,
Okay.
giving them information about the other aircraft's position,
Mm-hmm.
altitude,
Okay.
and direction of travel.
So it's like having a second set of eyes in the sky,
Exactly.
helping pilots maintain situational awareness.
That's right.
But can pilots rely solely on ATC to avoid collisions?
While traffic advisories are helpful,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that the ultimate responsibility for collision avoidance rests with the pilot. They need to be actively scanning for traffic,
Right.
using their own judgment,
Uh-huh.
and taking appropriate action to avoid potential conflicts,
Okay.
even if ATC hasn't specifically alerted them to a potential threat.
So even with ATC providing support,
Right.
pilots still need to be proactive
Absolutely.
about looking out for themselves and other aircraft.
That's right.
What other services does ATC provide?
Besides traffic advisories,
Okay.
ATC also provides services like vectoring,
Vectoring. Okay.
which involves giving pilots specific headings to follow.
So it's like a personalized navigation service in the sky.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
ATC might vector aircraft for a variety of reasons,
Okay.
like avoiding areas of bad weather,
Okay.
sequencing them for landing,
Uh-huh.
or directing them to a specific location.
Okay.
And speaking of sequencing,
Yeah, sequencing.
that's another important function of ATC.
So that's how ATC manages the flow
Exactly.
of arriving and departing traffic at an airport.
That's right. Controllers will assign aircraft specific positions
Uh-huh.
in a landing or departure sequence
Okay.
to ensure that everything happens smoothly and safely.
Got it.
They're basically choreographing the flow of traffic,
Okay.
making sure that everyone takes their turn and no one cuts in line.
It's like a carefully choreographed ballet
It is.
in the sky.
Yeah.
Okay. And ATC also plays a crucial role in handling emergencies, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They coordinate with pilots,
Uh-huh.
emergency services, and other agencies to ensure a safe and coordinated response to any situation,
Okay.
whether it's an engine failure,
Okay.
a medical emergency,
Uh-huh.
or even a security threat.
Right.
They are the central hub of information and coordination during those critical moments.
Yeah, it makes you realize how important their role is.
Absolutely.
Not just for routine operations, but for handling those unexpected
That's right.
and sometimes life-threatening situations as well.
Absolutely.
It makes you appreciate them even more.
It does.
So to provide these essential services, ATC relies heavily on technology.
Yes, they do.
We've talked about radar.
Right.
Can you break down the different types of radar systems
Yes.
used in air traffic control?
So the most basic type of radar is primary radar.
Okay, primary radar.
It works by sending out radio waves
Okay.
and detecting the echoes that bounce back from objects,
Okay.
including aircraft.
So it's like a bat using echolocation,
That's a great way to visualize it.
but with radio waves instead of sound.
Exactly.
All right.
Primary radar can determine an aircraft's range and azimuth,
Okay.
but it can't determine altitude.
Okay, so for that we need secondary surveillance radar.
That's right, also known as the ATC Radar Beacon System, or ATCRBS.
Okay, ATCRBS.
Mhm.
And how is secondary radar different from primary radar?
So secondary radar relies on a piece of equipment in the aircraft
Okay.
called a transponder.
Is that the thing pilots set
Yes.
to a 4-digit code?
Exactly. The transponder receives a signal from the ground-based radar
Uh-huh.
and responds with a coded reply
Okay.
that includes the aircraft's altitude, along with its identification.
So it's like a two-way conversation
That's a good way to think about it.
between the ground radar and the aircraft's transponder. Okay.
That exchange of information
Yep.
is what allows the controller to see the aircraft's altitude and other data
Uh-huh.
on their radar screen.
It sounds like secondary radar gives controllers a much more complete picture of the airspace than they would get with just primary radar.
Absolutely. It's a vital part of ATC's ability to manage traffic safely and efficiently.
Okay.
And the technology is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
There's a newer system called ADS-B,
ADS-B.
Automatic Dependent Surveillance Broadcast.
Okay.
That's set to revolutionize air traffic control.
I've heard a lot about ADS-B.
Yeah.
What makes it so special?
So unlike traditional radar, which is ground-based, ADS-B uses GPS satellites to determine an aircraft's position. The aircraft then broadcasts that information along with its altitude, speed, and other data to ground stations and other ADS-B-equipped aircraft.
So it's like every airplane has its own...
That's a great way to visualize it.
Little broadcasting station.
Exactly.
Sharing its location and other information with everyone else.
That's right. And the advantages of ADS-B are pretty significant.
Okay.
It provides more precise and more frequent position updates.
Okay.
Enabling surveillance even in areas where radar coverage is limited.
Wow.
Plus, it enhances situational awareness for both pilots and controllers.
It sounds like the future.
It certainly is.
Of air traffic control.
That's right. And the FAA has been gradually implementing ADS-B across the national airspace system over the past few years.
So what about those situations where ATC is unable to provide radar service?
In those cases, pilots have to rely on other methods of navigation and traffic avoidance.
Okay.
Like pilotage and dead reckoning.
Pilotage, that's navigating by landmarks, right?
That's right.
Like using your eyes to follow rivers, roads, and other visual cues on the ground.
It's the old school method of navigation.
Yeah.
And it's still an essential skill for pilots to have.
Okay.
Even in today's world of GPS and sophisticated avionics.
Okay.
And then there's dead reckoning.
Dead reckoning, okay.
Which is a bit more mathematical.
So pilots are using like formulas and calculations to estimate their position based on their speed heading.
That's right.
And elapsed time.
It's not as accurate as GPS or radar navigation.
Okay.
But it's a valuable tool to have when those other systems are unavailable.
It makes you realize how important it is for pilots to have a variety of tools and techniques in their arsenal so they can adapt to different situations.
It's all about being prepared.
Yeah.
And having redundancy in your navigation systems. Okay. And speaking of being prepared, let's talk about another potential hazard that every pilot needs to be aware of.
Okay.
Wake turbulence.
Wake turbulence.
Those invisible swirls of danger.
Yeah. I always get nervous when we're landing.
Right.
And I see a big jet taking off.
Yeah.
On a nearby runway.
I know what you mean.
Is it true that wake turbulence is only a problem?
So it's a common misconception.
Okay.
But the reality is that wake turbulence can be generated by any aircraft.
Really?
Yeah.
Even small planes?
Even small planes create wake turbulence.
Oh, wow.
But it's most hazardous when a smaller, lighter aircraft encounters the wake of a larger, heavier aircraft.
Okay, that makes sense. But can you remind me what exactly causes wake turbulence?
Sure. Essentially, it's a disturbance in the air.
Okay.
Created by the passage of an aircraft.
Okay.
As an aircraft generates lift. It creates a pair of counter-rotating vortices.
Vortices.
That trail behind the wingtips.
So like mini tornadoes?
That's a great visualization.
Spinning off the ends of the wings.
That's right. And these vortices can be incredibly powerful.
Okay.
Especially those created by large aircraft.
And what makes them so dangerous?
If a smaller aircraft flies into a vortex, it can experience sudden and extreme rolling motions.
Wow.
Potentially exceeding the aircraft's structural limits. Or even causing the pilot to lose control.
So the plane could literally flip over.
It's a possibility, especially if the pilot is caught off guard.
Wow.
And doesn't react quickly enough.
Okay.
Even if the aircraft doesn't completely roll, the turbulence within those vortices can cause structural damage.
Okay.
Disorient the pilot, or even lead to a loss of altitude.
It sounds like something you definitely want to avoid.
You do.
Are there procedures to help pilots
Absolutely.
stay out of those invisible danger zones?
The key to mitigating the risk of a wake turbulence encounter is understanding how wake turbulence behaves and adjusting your flight path accordingly.
So knowing where those vortices are likely to be.
Exactly.
That they move.
That's right. The strength of the vortices depends on the generating aircraft's weight, speed, and configuration.
Okay.
And those vortices tend to sink at a rate of several hundred feet per minute.
Okay.
And can drift laterally with the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So pilots need to take these factors into account.
So it's not just a matter of staying behind the aircraft.
Right.
It's about anticipating where those vortices might be.
Exactly.
And taking steps to avoid them.
Precisely, for example, when landing behind a larger aircraft.
Okay.
The general rule is to stay at or above the larger aircraft's approach path and to touch down beyond its touchdown point.
So giving those vortices time to move out of the way.
Exactly. And when departing behind a large aircraft, pilots should rotate before the larger aircraft's rotation point and climb above its climb path. So basically getting out of its way as quickly and safely as possible.
Stay out of their way and you're less likely to encounter their wake turbulence.
That's right.
Okay, so we've talked about wake turbulence and its potential dangers.
Right.
But let's shift our focus to a different but equally important challenge.
Okay.
Preventing collisions on the ground.
Collision avoidance on the ground is absolutely crucial, especially in the bustling environment of an airport. Pilots have to be incredibly vigilant and utilize all their skills and resources to maintain safety.
And it's not just about looking out for other planes, is it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Pilots need to maintain a constant 360-degree awareness of their surroundings.
Okay.
That includes looking out for other aircraft vehicles, pedestrians, and even wildlife that might wander onto the taxiways or runways.
So it's like driving a car.
That's a great analogy.
Except with much higher stakes.
Much higher stakes.
Okay, and just like when you're driving, you need to be aware of your blind spots.
Absolutely.
Those pesky areas where your view is obstructed.
Right.
Are there blind spots?
Absolutely.
In an aircraft?
In aircraft, blind spots can be caused by the wings,
the
fuselage, the engine cowling, or even something as simple as the sun visor.
Okay, so pilots need to be extra diligent about checking their blind spots.
That's right. And there are specific techniques they can use. Like making slight heading changes. Or even rocking the wings back and forth to get a better view of what's behind them.
It's like turning your head to look over your shoulder.
Exactly.
Except you're doing it with the whole airplane.
That's a great way to put it.
And in addition to visual scanning, pilots also use their radios to communicate their intentions.
That's right.
And listen for other aircraft that might be in the area.
That's right.
So those radio calls, like turning base for runway 36 or taxiing to the ramp, aren't just for show.
Not at all.
Okay.
Those radio calls are essential for maintaining situational awareness. And letting other pilots know your position and intentions.
Right.
It's like a courtesy announcement.
Yeah.
But also a safety measure.
So it's a good reminder that those radio calls aren't just about following procedures.
That's right.
They're about actively participating in a system of shared awareness.
Exactly.
That helps keep everyone safe.
Absolutely. And even though a pilot might technically have the right of way in certain situations, it's always best to err on the side of caution.
Right.
And avoid potential conflicts.
Even
if it means yielding to another aircraft.
So even if the rules say you can go first, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Precisely. Safety should always be the top priority. And in addition to those general principles, there are specific procedures that pilots are expected to follow to enhance collision avoidance both on the ground and in the air.
Can you give me some examples of those procedures?
Sure. Before takeoff, pilots are supposed to scan the approach area for any potential landing traffic and adjust their position if necessary to ensure a clear view.
So making sure there are no surprises coming in for a landing.
That's right.
While they're preparing to depart.
That's right. And during climbs and descents, pilots are encouraged to make gentle banks left and right. Allowing them to continuously scan the airspace for other aircraft.
Those S-turns that you sometimes see planes doing.
What's one example?
On final approach. Is that an example of this?
Exactly. It allows pilots to get a wider view of the airspace. And hopefully spot any potential conflicts.
So they're not just maneuvering for fun. They're actively looking for traffic.
That's right.
What about when they're flying straight and level?
Even when flying straight and level, pilots should perform clearing procedures at regular intervals, just to make sure there's no traffic sneaking up on them.
So never assuming that the coast is clear.
Exactly. And certain areas like traffic patterns and VOR sites require extra vigilance as they tend to have a higher concentration of aircraft.
So traffic patterns, those standardized procedures for aircraft arriving and departing an airport, those can be particularly hazardous because aircraft are converging from different directions.
That's right. And VOR sites.
VOR sites,
those navigational aids that pilots use for instrument flight can be like busy intersections in the sky with aircraft coming and going from different directions.
Yeah, it makes you realize that collision avoidance isn't just about seeing the other aircraft.
That's right.
It's about anticipating where they might be and taking steps to avoid those potential conflict points.
Precisely. And all of this comes back to that fundamental principle of situational awareness.
Right, situational awareness.
Pilots need to have a clear understanding of where they are, where other aircraft are, and where they're going.
It's like having a mental map.
That's right.
Of the airspace and constantly updating it as the situation changes.
That's right.
Well, this deep dive has been quite a journey.
It has.
We've covered an incredible amount of information.
We have.
From the basics of airport categories and types to those hair-raising moments.
Absolutely.
Like runway incursions and radio failures.
Right. We've explored everything from the ground environment
That's amazing.
to the airspace system.
Yeah.
From the essential role of air traffic control to the importance of those seemingly mundane markings and signs.
It's amazing to see.
Guide pilots safely through those bustling environments.
How it all comes together to create this complex but remarkably efficient system.
It really is a fascinating system.
And it's a system that relies heavily on both technology and human expertise. From those high-tech radar systems and advanced avionics to the skill and judgment of pilots and air traffic controllers.
It is a delicate balance.
It's a delicate balance of technology and human factors. Working together to ensure safety and efficiency.
That's right. And as you continue your own exploration of the aviation world, keep in mind those essential principles we've discussed today. Always be vigilant. Communicate clearly. And never hesitate to ask for clarification if something is unclear.
Whether you're a seasoned pilot or a first-time flyer, understanding the complexities of airport operations can enhance your travel experience.
Absolutely.
And make those journeys even more enjoyable.
Safe travels, everyone.
Until our next deep dive.